Hello everyone. So we're just waiting. My name is Pindile. I'm an educator here at Tshisimani. We're just waiting for Mo to give me a thumbs up. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone who's in the audience in Cape Town, in Tshisimani, but also everyone who is joining us online. My name is Pindile Unene, and I'm an educator here at Tshisimani. And I'll be facilitating the discussion tonight. I'll be facilitating the discussion this afternoon or tonight. And our focus today is on democracy. It's on democracy because there's hardly a day that goes by in South Africa today where this word democracy is not discussed. And very often when people talk about democracy, they also talk about almost 30 years, nearly 3 decades of democratic rule, and how that has been a bitter disappointment for many people, how that has existed side by side with inequality, with poverty, with commodification of basic services, and with what one of our speakers calls bad politics of corruption, of nepotism, patronage, and all of that. Before this seminar, as a way of preparing ourselves and getting ourselves ready to engage the speakers, we had a workshop, a preparatory workshop, where participants started off with the question, democracy means to me, and they tried to complete that sentence. Lots of ideas came up. Some of those ideas around the idea about how the commodification of basic services robs people of their democratic rights. Other people spoke about how their understanding of democracy is also linked to what happened in the past, and how that's supposed to be a radical break with the past, both in terms of racism, brutal exploitation, and so on. Whereas other people also spoke about how the politics of patronage, corruption, nepotism, and the destruction of basic services actually tempers with their ability to enjoy some of the freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution. So we did a bit of that in the workshop, and ended off with presenting 3 positions, and one can argue that those positions are present in South African society today. A position that firmly says, look, there's a need to defend our democracy. It's under threat. It's under threat from the different factions in the ANC, and it's under threat from those who want to undermine the rule of law, and so on and so on. So our role is to defend democracy. Then others say, look, this democracy is actually a far cry from the one that generations of activists fought for and dreamed about, and therefore it's a scam in this way, and how many a times democracy is now only understood as the vote, and how that vote is becoming increasingly meaningless. And then there are views that says, look, in and of itself, democracy is not bad. It gives us space to challenge what we do not want, whether that is capitalism or it's all some of those ills that we speak about here. So there's a need maybe to fight for democracy, to reclaim it and to expand it. So those are the 3 positions we're considering before this session. But this evening we are joined by 2 comrades who come from different parts of South Africa, who have been active in different struggles for many years. We've got Comrade Nonhlen Butuma, an activist who fights for land and environmental rights in the Eastern Cape. In 2007, Nonhlen was part of the activists who formed Amadiba Crisis Committee, and the main aim was to unite community members in 5 villages to work together in challenging destructive mining projects and the collusion between government and transnational mining companies. And how that collusion is a big threat to the environment, to livelihoods, and survival of many people there. And then we've got Comrade Garnet Gaff. Garnet has been an activist who spent almost 30 years, or over 30 years, in politics. Over 30 years in politics. He has led various organizations, including the ANC, the SACP. Started off in COSAS as a young firebrand. He's no longer in those politics now, quite openly. Left the ANC, very critical of the SACP. And now Garnet writes extensively about a need for a new politics as a response to the decay of the ANC, as well as the social crisis that confronts South Africa today. He is based in Bloemfontein and he works in the provincial treasury as a fiscal policy research manager. The provincial mining is and working around that, as well as being active in different organizations and struggles. He is a contributor to the book Destroying Democracy, Neoliberal Capitalism and the Rise of Authoritarian Politics. And he's got a copy of the book in his hand, an interesting book. So that's just by way of introduction. We've sort of asked the speakers to come at this question of democracy, as well as these different perspectives, to come at it from where they are. So Comrade Nonhle will talk largely about the struggles that she's been engaged in, as the struggles, the right to say no, and then Comrade Garnet will also speak to that in relation to what he calls the social crisis and what's needed to respond to that. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks,
I discussed that. But I situate that, as Pindile correctly points out, within the context of the deepening social crisis, post-1994 social crisis. So that's where I situate this discussion. So this book, fortunately, is on open access. So you can get it on PDF. It can be distributed to all the comrades. They can read it on WhatsApp. So my chapter is chapter 11 there. So initially I thought I would start first by summarizing my views as I've written them on this book, and then address 4 points. Those 4 points would be the post-1994 social crisis, framing a left critique of the ANC crisis. 3, the post-1994 social formation. 4, building a new historic bloc for change. So I thought initially that was my approach. Maybe it is still my approach, but I'm no longer starting with summarizing the book, because the book has been written. So comrades must read it. My chapter in the book. So I want to start off this way. In 1993, in April, I attended the funeral of Tshisimani. When Tshisimani died, there was a big possibility that the whole country could break into a terror. That's the moment anyone who's my age and older, even younger people who was there, they would know that we're at the brink of a real civil war. Now, it was Nelson Mandela who went to SABC studios, to calm the nation, to condemn the assassination, brutal assassination of Tshisimani, and calm the nation, and promise the nation that democracy is coming. But then, at the funeral of Chris, I remember one slogan. You know, that was repeated. The Charles Mabula was the MC together with Cyril Ramaphosa. Charles Mabula was the deputy to Chris in the Communist Party. Cyril Ramaphosa was the general secretary of the ANC. So Charles Mabula kept on shouting this slogan. Vali Parliamente Yamasela Vala! Vuli Parliamente Yamantu Vula! You know, now this slogan has been resonating as I was preparing for this talk. And it's like, that's what we need today. Vali Parliamente Yamasela Vala! Vuli Parliamente Yamantu Vula! So, there's a contradiction there. I'll come back to it. Then I thought of two other songs that we sang in the late 80s and in the early 90s. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Because the union makes us strong. Then there was a part that says, the House of Parliament shall be a public lavatory. The House of Parliament shall be a public lavatory. You know? So there's a reason why we say it that way. We're not just rascals. You know? No, there's a reason. But there was another song, again, about government. It went, forward we are marching, forward we are marching, forward we are marching to the people's government. The doors of learning and culture shall be open for all. Forward we are marching to the people's, and we'll go on citing all the clauses of the Freedom Charter. There shall be houses, security and comfort. Forward we are marching. You see, now, those slogans, those songs, they condemn Parliament. The other one says Parliament will be a public lavatory. Why? Because that Parliament was a Parliament to oppress the people. That Parliament was a Parliament to advance the interests of capital. That Parliament was a Parliament to advance the racist interests of apartheid. It was not. But then in the other song was saying, forward we're marching to a people's government. And that people's government is not presented as a whole in a song, but it has a social content. It said, the doors of learning and culture shall be open. In a song, it said that. There shall be houses, security and comfort. In a song, we said that. You know, so the people's government was never just a government governing in a neutral way. You know, it was a government that was supposed to be buttressed in the major demands of the people. You know, but sadly, that has not materialized. Why? I tend to think of democracy rather as democratization, rather than democracy something that is done forever. It's like this. No. Even in world history, democracy, you know, happened as a process. So to me, democracy represents the direct involvement of the people in the social management of the country. But more than that, democracy is about social progress. Democracy is about emancipation. It can't just be about government, no, about government, about poor. On whose behalf? There should be social progress. We need education, we need health, we need houses. We should govern to address those things. Decent jobs, all of those things. So democracy has a social content. But again, it's towards emancipation. It's a movement. It's not done completely sacrosanct. No, don't touch it. No, it's not complete. Because you see, when democracy started in Europe in the 1840s, workers had no rights. Actually, democracy, me and Mazibuko, we don't agree that it is a liberal democracy. No. The actual history shows that democracy comes out of struggles of popular classes. Everywhere in Europe of workers, the conquest of the working class in the 19th century, and they fought throughout that century. In Africa, the liberation movement fought. So that we have democracy. In Asia, the same, the liberation movement, the communist parties in Russia and in China, they led to revolutionary advances, And in China, they did not even call it, they don't call it like a socialist state. No, they say the official name of China is People's Democratic Republic. It's not socialist like like Russia was. No. So it shows that it's an ongoing thing. And Mao Zedong used to say it's going to take 1,000 years to build socialism. So in South Africa, I attribute our failure and this social crisis to two things: corruption of the ANC in government, and secondly, failure to effect a meaningful social transformation. Now, this meaningful social transformation meant that education needed to be expanded in a more meaningful way quite early on. Meant that health services needed to be protected from the commodifying forces of neoliberalism. So with the pandemic, we saw that we don't have a health system. Social transformation meant that the majority of the people must have decent jobs. Meant that the economy must be redistributed in terms of income, in terms of wealth. There must be redistribution. So something needed to give. So there's no way that all of those things could have happened without touching the historical legacies that white people accumulated, without touching the position of historical capital. No. That's why in 1994, big companies, when they heard that the ANC is coming to govern, because ANC had a lot of rhetoric, socialist rhetoric and nationalization rhetoric, they disinvested here and invested offshore. Big South African companies, they did that. So then the ANC thought that no, we need to lure them back, attract them back. So the ANC liberalized the economy. It implemented neoliberalism. It said no, there should be flexible labor markets. There should be an exchange rate that is variable, not fixed. There should be liberalization of capital markets. Capital must be able to move as and when it wants. The state must not be too involved. There should be privatization. Now, all the things that the World Bank wants, the ANC did them. But there was still no investment that grows the economy and employs people. Now, Professor Mkandawiri, one of the best radical experts of development economics, he was asked the other time when he was here, 2010 or so, that after the ANC had liberalized the economy and met all the boxes, ticked all the boxes in the IMF and World Bank policy prescripts. Why did business not invest to expand the economy? Nkanda really said they looked and they thought to themselves, this looks good, too good to be true. You know, because business operates on the basis of high risk, high return. You know, so the economy was never transformed. But then corruption kept on increasing, meaning in the absence of a political mandate for these state entities, the elites saw these entities as their assets to loot. You know, they saw this budget as their budget to loot, because there was no mandate to serve the people. You know, so which is why when we frame the corruption, we must not just frame it in moralizing ways. It was part of an accumulation system by the African bourgeoisie out of the ANC and their allies in the private sector, because the economy was closed. You know, so all the assets were in private hands, owned by big multinational corporations and the local bourgeoisie. So the black bourgeoisie, the only avenue they had into the economy was through the state. And the state is limited. As a proportion of expenditure in the GDP, the state is about 30%. So the state is limited. And we're talking GDP. GDP is not the totality of all the assets. No. I mean, you still have big assets, you know, that are not counted in the GDP. The trading markets, in the stock markets, they're not counted. And all of those companies are mostly foreign owned. So you have monopolies dominating our economy, and the ANC had turned itself largely to be in service of these monopolies. And so the BE people then operate like a subcontractor, you know, in these markets dominated by monopolies, you know. But that keeping the prices, because it means the people are not getting the service, people are not getting jobs, poverty is getting high. So that's why last year we had the July unrest, you know. So yes, somebody orchestrated that thing. But the people we saw on TV, I mean, they were not called by anyone. They went there to loot those supermarkets because they were hungry. And they remember that when Cyril introduced the lockdown in April, I still remember that day, in March last year, he made no mention at all of social support, at all. People were locked in their houses without food, without money, without anything. And when they saw this opportunity that the supermarket is being looted here, they remembered that. You know, that for 2 months, there was that hard lockdown, you remember? 2-3 months, you could not stand on the street, wash a car, you could not go to the mall, help people with their groceries, and then they pay. You couldn't do anything. It meant that you starved to death. You know, and then there was Saga as well, killing people. So which is why part of his response, Cyril, on the 25th of July, you know, after the parade, is this an insurrection or what? He was saying an insurrection, others in his cabinet were saying no, it's not an insurrection. But on the 25th of July, he reintroduced the 350 social card to show that poverty, he was admitting that poverty had a big role, you know, it had a big hand in the social angles. So that's the crisis we're under. It's deepening. So in Xhosa they say, you know. So Yeah. Now, so what is the society that has been forming after 1994? Which will take me to my last point about a historic bloc. Now, after 1994, a neoliberal capitalism was allowed to accumulate on its own, unregulated, uninterrupted by the state. So people didn't get jobs, services collapsed in front of our eyes. You know? So meaning unemployment increased, poverty in urban and rural areas increased. I mean, whereas in the past, you know, there was subsistence farming, the liberalization of the 90s, the original time, you know. So we live in a sea of poverty. Now, and then there's a black middle class, you know. A small part of it is in business, you know. Then a large part of it is in government, you know. And this small middle class really is there to give some credit that we are in a racial society. We are de-racializing the economy. When even with Muzibe, Kamlet, and Ramaphosa, and all these black millionaires, you know, the majority of the wealth in this country is still in white hands. They were not interrupted. And the failure did not happen in 1994. No. So there's no deal. Why am I there? I'm opening a bank somewhere. No. We were sold as we were watching. So throughout. And they're still saying, I think today, you should come and tell me what Mandash is doing there. So there's no secret where we're being sold. So that social formation of inequality, it meant that you now have millionaires actually, within the black township, in the sea of poverty. So with unemployment increasing, it means trade unions are weakening. So the stronger trade unions today are public sector trade unions. Even themselves are sweetheart unions. So the historical industrial trade unions are very weak in terms of reach of membership, in terms of fighting. You know, they have been weakening extremely. Fewer workers are in trade unions today. You know, so there's been a big inequality. That's what we learn. Now, this takes me to my last point. So, how do we build a historic bloc? You know, before 1994, we had a historic bloc that was coordinating the struggle. This historic bloc was consisting of workers, was consisting of students, of youth in the townships, of religious organizations, of women groups, of artists. You know, all of these sectors of our society constituted a strong bloc. You know, that created a crisis for apartheid in the late 90s, and such that apartheid could not continue to rule, and made negotiations possible in the early 90s. You know, so that historic bloc won the day. The ANC, when it came out of exile, it succeeded to insert itself within mass movements, actually from the 70s into the 80s. You know, the ANC succeeded. And Khaled Jordan and Meg Maharaj admit that point in their book, say it's not like that there was some central government in Lusaka controlling struggles here. We had autonomous mass movements. You know, the ANC, better than PAC and Arabo, is that it could work within autonomous movements, and when it got unbanned, it used the infrastructure created by these movements, the UDF in particular, to unseat the Nets in 1994. So we need a similar thing. You know, so to is Kolobeni, the Amadiba crisis there, where they've been fighting with mining companies. It's Marikana, where workers were fighting for a living wage. Because a living wage is important within the context of South African capitalism, that with a living wage, you displace cheap labor as an accumulation system. So they succeeded in Marikana with all the disaster that followed. Now, you have had the Dores, where farm workers fought, for a living wage as well, for proper rights at work. We've also had the fees must fall, where the youth, the students, said the power of the people is bigger than the power of the people in power. And when they announced a decrease to what was their initial demand, to the fees, he announced a decrease. The students addressed the nation and said, no, we want zero decrease, zero increase. We want no increase at all. And government considered. So that's how this free education came about. But Zuma did it in a tricky way. He still tricked us because he gave us free education but increased the tax. So in economics, that's crazy. The poor, you give them a service, but then you squeeze them again. So actually, the net effect is the same. So it's not free education, it's at our expense. So we had those 4 moments. What those 4 moments show is that the people can rise from below and kick out the bourgeoisie and implement a democracy on behalf of the people for the people. Now, I want to, the situation is very beautiful. As I conclude, there's a quotation I saw by one of Pindile's idols, Angela Davis. She says here, when we know we need hope, we can't do anything without optimism. My friend Marie Kaba, who is part of the abolitionist movement, says hope is a discipline. Our job is to cultivate hope, and that is what I always try to do. That's what we need to do. But then, when I conclude to sit down, when I conclude this paper here, because I write as a socialist, not just a disengaged intellectual, I say revolutionary advances are possible on the basis of developing a real and new people's power to drive away the power of oligarchic elites and monopoly capital, which are responsible for protecting and reproducing social inequality of post-1994 South Africa. Marx did not expound any theory of the great day of revolution and definitive solutions. On the contrary, he insisted on an open-minded approach, believing that a revolution is a long transition marked by conflict between social powers, the former powers in decline and the new ones on the rise. Let the power and organization of popular classes rise for a meaningful left renewal in South Africa. Amandla!
Away!
Away! Two!
Amandla!
Where the patterns of the past continue.
the workshop that took place earlier, so it's going to be quite interesting. Over to you. Yeah, that's fine.
Good evening. How are you? Yeah, somebody said that don't ever ask people how they are because they're not a doctor. But it's good to know if people are fine or not fine, even if you don't want to give any indication. Yeah, I will try by all means to lift up my voice, and I hope everybody hear my voice. I used to address quite a lot of number of people. Yeah, I think the comrades here is already stated clear what the democracy look like, should we look like, and I hope it's exactly as he says. But what I'm going to do, I'll share an experience with the state, with the democracy that we are talking about. How did we feel after 1994? What is our experience as the people living in Colombia? Honestly, we never enjoy democracy. What I can say to you. 2 years after we voted or we were in democracy, the company from Australia land in South Africa and require land. Land which is a precious thing for an African or for an African. When somebody comes and require a land, he take your identity. He wants your identity. Africans are known through land. Without land, no identity. And when they require the land, it was full of minerals. They required those minerals. And they were expecting us to move. Just 2 years in democracy. And these displacing people were just thinking, we left it back, but it was continued. That is the democracy. Just 1996, we've been told to move in order to open a space for so-called development. And the question, whose development? Who benefits? Who controls? Those are the questions that we question in the democracy. And once you question those questions, you're going to be labeled of anti-government and anti-development. That's how it's been labeled. As from since 1994 until today. Because we question the democracy. We question the development. And immediately we question those. It was very easy for the state to decide that, okay, there's no need to speak to these communities because they are blocking development. They are blocking us to get rich. Because all what they want is to enrich for themselves. It's nothing about us. It's about them. That is why, from the beginning, we said no to mining. And we're not saying that when we say no, we need shares or being shareholding, some sort of. We said we are happy the way we live because we have land, we have water, we have shelter, which are the basic needs of an African person. Now, if you don't have those things, your life is miserable. Those are the things that is important for a living. Now, we do have those things, but government promised jobs. That no, if we open a mining or an open cast mining here, we're going to give you jobs. No, we don't want to be slavery in our own homes. We refused. We said no. Here we sustain ourselves. We have our own livelihood. Today, where I come from, we have food that we feed South Africa. Also, even Africa. Because we produce the crops, we produce food, all sorts of crops. Now, if you displace our local economy for your national before we say yes to any development. That is this development, how long is it going to take me? Those are the questions that we need to ask when it comes to development. But it's unfortunately, the democracy that we're in is not allowing question. But we call it a democracy. What kind of democracy cannot question? Those are the experiences that we have. But when you start to question, the next thing that you're going to experience is a force of police. That is the experience that we're experiencing on this democracy. All the time when the government officials come to our communities, they are doing so-called public participation. They bring thousands of police. This thing used to happen before 1994, but it's still happening in 2022. Now, what democracy is this? Because this is a public consultation, public participation. Communities have the right to be consulted, to participate in decision making. Now, if you brought in the police, that's an intimidation. Because you're intimidating those people. That means they're not going to be free to speak. Because police are around them. And it's not just police with full arms. And you can even see that if I speak, the next day police are coming to my house and arresting me. And those things are very common on this democracy. And now, is this the democracy that we fought for? I don't think so. Our democracy has been sold long time ago. That is the experience that we're experiencing right now when it comes to our government. Now, myself, I'm still living in a communal land. Those places is called communal, where it's governed by the traditional leaders. You must understand what was the purpose of establishing the traditional leaders. The purpose was to make an access to the rural communities, to make sure that there is an access, there is a communication. But it turned to something else. Now, the purpose is no longer an access of rural communities. The purpose right now is to use those traditional leaders as the puppets of the state, as the puppets of elite. Now, this is how our land is being taken away from the Africans, through traditional leaders. Now, when our government, they are talking about consultation, they are no longer consulting our communities. They are consulting traditional leaders, individuals. What the democracy says in terms of the consultation, it says that everybody, those are affected and those are interested, must be consulted. But they don't do that. They consult individuals because they know that if I consult the chief is not about consulting. It's a negotiation. It's a negotiating deal. We negotiate a deal, myself and the chief. That's all. It's not a consultation. Let's take it seriously. This matter of that what the Mandasha right now is doing, he said that I'm consulting traditional leaders. It's not a consultation. It's a negotiating deals in order to make sure that when the deals are being finalized with the traditional leaders, now the traditional leaders are going to turn against their own people because the deal is already been made up. And we have an experience of the chiefs are being bought just only 4x4. Just 4x4 for the land that is worth billions of billions. Just 4x4. Those are the deals that the state right now is trying to do. And then you call that democracy. And that is why we said that we don't think our state right now, they understand what is the meaning of democracy. They really don't understand. You can even see the laws that are being brought back. They are bringing the Bantustan laws into a democratic system where it's clear to say that a traditional leader can make a deal between the business company without consulting people. What kind of law in a democracy is that? These are apartheid laws, but they're shaping in a way that it can fool our communities. Now, the issue is that we are fighting all these battles. What channel is that we follow? Because this battle is not a battle of people of Colombia, but it's a world battle. Because you can go everywhere. The issue is about invading land and push people away from the land. What channels do we do? We follow the courts of law. And when we follow the courts of law, the state hates that. Hates so much. And they call us that we are anti-state and we are acting like an apartheid government. We are acting like colonialism. Those are the names that the community is being given. And then the question, who is the colonialism between the communities and the state? Because if you look the battle of 1950s, of 1912, it was about exploitation of natural resources of Africa from those big corporations. Now, the same government, it opens the doors for the big corporations to enter and exploit the natural resources of Africa and leave Africa in poverty. Now, we must ask our question, who's acting like an apartheid regime? It's the same state. But the difference is that the previous state was white, and the current state is black, but there is no difference. There is no difference, unless I'm blinded. But for myself, I don't see any difference. Those are the channels that we use in order to fight the state. We always go to court. The first case of the titanium where they want to open there, we take them to court. And we won that case against our own state because we're not taking the mining company. We're taking our own state because the laws that South Africa signed after 1994 are very good. For your own struggle, in order to fight for democracy, use those laws. That constitution, it contains very good information to protect our citizens. That's what we do. We take those laws. We didn't use anything somewhere else. We use the laws that they're supposed to implement and fight them in court. And they lost. It shows that the democracy is a joke. They just forget the laws that they signed for themselves. Now they are working against their own laws. That's what we've done in order to challenge our own state. And I know that it's not so easy to challenge the state. And there are treaties that also South Africa signed at United Nations together with other countries, which is free, prior, and informed consent. What was the aim of that? The aim was to establish a bottom-up participation and consultation of an indigenous communities before the beginning of development. And now, it's stated clear, and South Africa is part and parcel of those treaties. They signed that the bottom-up must not, it must be coming a bottom-up consultations. But now they are no longer doing that. The deal is between the government and the company, and it's a done deal. You don't need to consult people. And what we require as communities, we said that consultation alone is not enough. It's not enough. Consultation is just a tick in the box. It's where you're going to say that I'm here to tell you that I'm here to demolish all these houses. And you have no right to say no or yes. That's consultation. But we demand a consent. That is why we said we demand a free, prior, informed consent. Where we must give a consent. If this we want it or this we don't want it. And those treaties is part of the They like it or not, they can't coexist. That's how we beat them with their own laws. Just beat them with their own laws. That's what we do. And I just encourage everybody. Let's utilize the laws that we have for our own good. If we do so, we'll save the future of the next generation. Otherwise, this democracy, it's about to sink in the hands of our black society, in the hands of our own black government. It's about to sink. It's just a moment that everybody's waiting. But let's not allow that. Let's stand up and fight that and to make sure that it doesn't go. Otherwise, to go back, it will not going to be easy. And some of us will know how difficult is the back. And we don't even have the freedom of speech. Today we have a freedom of speech. Today we have a freedom of a protest. Those freedoms giving us to speak. Yes, we are free, but let's utilize it to make sure that it works for us. I'm about to finish. The shell issue, while I'm still talking about the mining. The shell issue is part of the mining. Right now, you can see that the most pushing in our state when it comes to uplift the economy is fossil fuel. That's what they are. Mandasha is one of the best ministers in the eyes of Ramaphosa because we are pushing fossil fuel. What do we want from fossil fuel? You know, I always say that as a government or as people, when we think of putting something in place, let's not think about now. Let's think also about tomorrow. We're talking about oil and gas, nuclear power plant. And look what is happening today in Ukraine. There are things that is good for making profit, but on the bad times, it's becoming a knife to you. Those are the things that we need to be very careful to put in place. Now, if you have a nuclear power plant in your country, in a bad times, that thing, it can kill the country within a second. That's all what we are doing right now. If the bomb can destroy that nuclear power in Ukraine, people will die walking. Those are the things that we never think. We say that, oh, this is going to make a profit. Now, oil and gas, we fight against. We are not fighting because our livelihood also in the ocean is there in the ocean. Now, if you destroy the ocean, you destroy us. As government promised South Africans that we're going to get jobs, there is nothing. There's no jobs for us. Working mining in the ocean is for the experts. They were going to come from Europe and work here, but South Africans are not going to work. And we're going to lose everything. This oil and gas is coming with poverty to South Africa, nothing else. But the state is going to benefit. As right now, Shell has already donated 15 million to ABC. Now it's clear that there is nothing for us. But who's going to be affected the most? Women. Women are going to be affected the most. This oil and gas is the most negative impact in terms of the climate change. Climate change is affecting all of us. We are being a severe heat wave. How come as a country we keep pushing for promoting the fossil fuel? That's why I said, right now we are no longer thinking straight. We are driven by the West. We are no longer thinking taking of land. There's nothing else. Right now, you can see that Guatemala is taking an oath that no matter what, at my own term, I will implement oil and gas. And I will build the smart city and displace people. And where that funding come from? And I will build the global mining for Tanzania and for Australians, no matter what. But why, as South African, we are not prioritizing our own issues? There are burning issues. Health system is falling apart. Education system is falling apart. You know, the most priority things as a country are not being considered. We are busy talking about oil and gas. We are not talking about the health. We are not talking about education. Kids today are not even having textbooks to read at school. But we are busy talking about building. Thank you.
traditional leaders. And then I think both of you also touched on the social content of democracy and how it ends without some of these things that many communities in South Africa are complaining and crying about, and united by this idea that the promise, better life for all, has not really materialized, even though some things have changed. There are democratic rights and freedoms which Nonke has highlighted, but really some of the social contradictions, the pain is still there. The social contradictions are still there. So what I'm going to do now is to really just open it up now for engagement. When we go through it this way, we're going to open up for engagement from the comrades who were in the prep workshop, prep session, to pose the questions. My understanding is that the questions are written on placards, so it's actually quite possible for someone to read them out. And maybe that's where we start. We can just organize ourselves to ask those questions. And maybe Simone and Zama can sort of help in, because I do see the placards and I just need to help with that. It doesn't seem like our generator is kicking in, so we're going to be in the dark. But hopefully the light from outside is helping us, but just know that the generator has kicked in. Hands for comments, questions. The placards, anybody? Is there a taker? Comment Fundi. And then I'm going to send hands there at the back before you move us. Comment Fundi. What also can anybody comment? The red t-shirt, comment Fundi. And comment was I'm going to take these two hands and then I'm going to come back to you the second round, because the last seminar I started with you, so I still remember. Right? So let's comment Fundi and then comrade Kumelelo and then comrades Joanne and comrade Pia.
Good evening, everyone. The first question that we came up with was on the theme of democracy is imperfect. One, how can it be reclaimed? That's number one. How can it be reclaimed? Democracy, how can it be reclaimed? Two, how do we keep following? Okay, so if ever we are reclaiming democracy from the state, or whoever, how do we keep them accountable? 3, how can we make sure that those who are supposed to protect our rights and provide justice and come to account when it's the same question but in 2 ways. So how can we really keep them accountable for whatever that they are doing or they have done before in terms of corruption and other issues around the state?
Okay.
And what type of democracy are we still hoping for?
Okay.
What was the ideal of democracy before 94? I think that's the question that's supposed to lead this one. What was the ideal of democracy that we were hoping for before 94? Now, currently, future purposes, what type of democracy are we hoping for?
Okay. So coming from the why don't we, so that's quite a bit. So there's question of accountability, and then there's question about dreams, hopes, and imagination. Back then, and also today. So why don't we park it there for now so that it's not this question, let's park it there, and then let's take it to Comrade Kumenelo, and then Comrades in front will come and make Comrade Kumenelo, let's do one comrade, one question.
Obviously, just first it's a comment who already kind of talk about 4 incidents that happened after 1994, which is the Marikana incident, to the Christmas Ford issue. I think also there's another incident whereby people were dying in numbers because of HIV/AIDS. And TAC mobilized people on the ground when the government was in denial, and therefore we fought to make sure that people had free access to HIV in our public facility. And that struggle saved lives, and saved the life of parents, brothers and sisters. My question to you is, in your book, representation, you talk about, if I'm not mistaken, about reviving or redoing the left. I'm not sure whether I got you well. Because previously you belonged to the organization, which is the SACP, which is regarded as a leftist organization. If you have good ideas of reviving the left, why you left that organization?
Change that is pro-poor.
And actions.
Okay. All right. Thanks for it.
Oh, okay. How do we recall a public representative that do not account to the people? First question. Second one, how can we change the democracy to work for us? Question 3 is there already. So I'll read the last one. Why is it that we can only vote for a party and not direct for a candidate?
All right. Yeah, that's quite a big thing. The principle of God, and other things. So who would like to just take on the questions from the Ghana?
These questions, very common, they are quite substantial. And in fact, see, That's why I say, I said, no, I will not talk about what I've been through here because it covers a lot of what Colin was talking about. For instance, the point that I omitted, which I noted here, is that this historic block of forces, the pre-1994, the trade unions, the warehouse students, women, that defeated apartheid. The vision was that they must continue after apartheid because freedom has always been imagined as a people-driven and people-centered process. Even in the IDP, there was that language, to support Nomsa's point about development. See, so development was not conceived as goodies that come from government and people are just passive recipients. No, it should be a people-driven in terms of relying on the energies of the people to drive it. But it should be people-centered in terms of addressing the real needs, the aspirations of the people. So the guarantor for such a process would then be movements. But then these movements, after 1994, because the situation had changed, comrades were taking power and money. The leading echelons, or the leading personnel, from trade unions, from mass movements, they were all subject to power. And they collapsed these mass movements. And new mass movements that emerged, TAC. In my book, in my chapter, I count TAC as one of the biggest social movements of post-1994. I even refer to the TAC victory of 2003, that court victory. No, not just a court victory. It came out of struggles that had been waged for years and years. So I recount TAC and COSATU as the biggest social movements of post-1994. And I say COSATU was destroyed completely leading to Kulukwan. At least before Kulukwan, COSATU still worked with other civil society organizations, other mass movements, but leading to Kulukwan. So Zuma achieved what they could not achieve, meaning conquering the entire ANC movement. Zuma had it in his pocket. The Communist Party, everybody. They were all Zumaphiles. So that bloc collapsed. So the new bloc of social movements, has been fighting struggles, making victories, but in an isolated way. It has not been able to present a vision, the things that comrades are talking about, because it's not enough to just hold them accountable. It's not enough to recall them, no. But the power of the people must express itself beyond this system and build a new system, because this one will not serve the people, and build a new system. So we can't just demand, no. So meaning, there is no way. So I think, and this one I should have done initially, this definition of democracy, first, as an institutional democracy of voting, of parliament, checks and balances, of the courts and what, they are fine. But you also need a real democracy where people, use their power, against institutions. And they can only do that through mass movements when they organize on the ground, build movements that impose power, that can even demand a change. So it's a long haul comment. So I thought that comment addresses some of these things that are going on. And so yes, we can improve the institutional mechanisms in our democracy. But that will still be enough, not enough. Because for as long as we think of democracy as a representative democracy, this government is not saying us. We're headed nowhere. We have the power. So tell me the other day was saying, Freedom Charter said, the people shall govern, not the ANC, the people. So the people can only unleash their power when we are organized. But similarly, for most of the past 30 years, impose. So that's why I said initially, I think of a democracy, not in a fixed model that when it's like this, I'm bombing. No. In history, there's never been to know it, but rather as an ongoing process of social management by the people, for the people, but that has social content and the vision of emancipation. So we're here somewhere. So it's not just democracy for its own sake, which is what institutional democracy tends to be. Now, so politically, in terms of the political parties, we have the ANC. The ANC enjoyed legitimacy of being a state party because it came out of the liberation struggle. So it enjoyed that legitimacy for a long time. So it was not possible to vote for another party and overthrow the ANC to vote for most of the time. It's only now that ANC is very determined. Why was it like that? It's because the ANC came out of the people's struggles for liberation and it represented their hopes. So that's why many battles are even fought within the ANC. But clearly the ANC has become not only a share, but reactionary now. I mean, the things that Webber is doing there is reactionary. The things that democracy says is reactionary. So, in fact, Tababeki was saying, if the ANC guys, this country will be in a deep crisis. No, that trend has passed. ANC is actually a danger to this country. There is evidence. Ramaphosa's own expert report about July and West says that there is a danger to national security government. And we saw Zuma agitating on TV. So we saw him. Then he can't expel Zuma. Can't say, no, comrade, we're killing him. He can't. So that moment has passed. Now, so yes, comrades, I agree, we need to improve the institutions. But what is going to be decisive is people organizing and articulating their demands. It's not just organizing. To say, we demand better housing. But better housing is not happening because there are budget cuts. So people must take the struggle to austerity. Austerity is informed by neoliberalism. So we must take now the struggle to thinking outside this society, to a post-capitalist society. And struggle for that radical vision in this society today. So that's how we're going to revive the left. So the Communist Party is dead and done. So the left, I define the left as those who espouse an anti-capitalist dimension in their politics. There are those like myself and people, both communists, who want capitalism to be replaced completely. Who are preoccupied with the main contribution of capitalism to labor and capital. We're on the side of labor. And we see socialism as the future. But then there are others. I talk about it. It's an important struggle. They disturb capitalism in a big way. There are others in youth development. Capitalism now can't offer our youth anything. They disturb capitalism. They have an anti-capitalist dimension. Women as well. Our communities in the townships, in the rural areas, they do have that. And so it's when we combine both social and political forces, So the mass movement must be strong, but then we need political parties that will link up with these mass movements to contest power. So in parliament, so it's a long haul, and victory in elections is not going to come before victory in population class matters. So we need first victory here on the ground, and then we have the victory in elections.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks, Khaled. At this point, we're going to open it up again. I'm watching the time, but I'm going to open it up again for a second round. Are we back? Yay! Yay! Yeah.
Yes.
And 1, 2, 3. On the question, how can we reclaim democracy? Honestly, it's a tough question. It's a really tough question. To reclaim this democracy is not an easy step at all. We can see that it goes to the question of what type of democracy we were hoping for after 1994. I think this is the way you can answer that question, because it's clear that the democracy that we're hoping for after 1994 is not the one that we are sitting in right now. I think, in my own thinking, we were hoping a deep democracy, not just a democracy, because a democracy that we are in right now, it's about vote, it's about majority and minority. Minority and majority is not a fair decision, because majority can take a wrong decision. That is the situation of the democracy that we have. Now, government says that majority support. It doesn't give a dialogue. A dialogue, it helps the communities to digest and to understand the content of the issue that we are facing. But the democracy that we are in right now, it doesn't give that space of a dialogue. And they hate that kind of dialogue. This is why in Kolobeni, where I come from, we always back and forward. Because you can see right now, it's a state versus community. The state is against their own people because of the democracy that we are in. And when we talk about the democracy that is good for communities, it's a customary law. Customary law, it allows that. And this is the democracy that we are using in our communities, where it says that even if it's one person still say no, you cannot go ahead. Make sure that everybody is convinced and it's okay about what you're going to do. And the problem is that the elite, they hate that type of democracy because it delays them. They want a shortcut to go and get profit. That's the problem that we are facing when it comes to democracy. They always take a shortcut, something that is going to make things easier for them to get or to access what they want. The other thing, how to change a democracy to work for us. We need to mobilize. We need to organize. We need to inform our communities. When we mobilize, when we organize, the haters or the opposition hate the mobilized communities. They hate that. But immediately they see that communities are mobilized. They know that they cannot split them. They cannot divide them. That is the medicine, how democracy can work for us. Thank you.
Of a green debate, something like that. So I just thought it's important to just throw Comrade Wazi, start us off. Comrade Karen. No, let me take comrade and then side. Comrade Makawe, I saw you, but like Wazi, I said the last time, you comrades were at the front. Let's see if there's an opportunity for you to come in and you come in after that. Is that Ace or just have one of you, let those 4 hands get a chance, and then if you do have a chance for the 10th round, you're best in line, okay?
Comrades, our democracy was sold at Codesa. That was the first sign of the end of democracy before it even began, and it came through very clearly in Codesa. So I have one question. Should we now work towards a people's Codesa as the way forward?
All right. Thanks for that, comrade. One question. Clear enough?
Good evening, comrades, and thank you for your presentation and for answering the questions. Mine is not a question, but mine is rather a concern, and I just want to exhale, because we're living in Cape Town, which is one of the most unequal cities in the world. And our city is led by the DA government and our municipalities. And this same DA government is the government that are imposing different policies, frameworks and laws upon particularly the poor of the city. And when we speak about a democracy that is in crisis, particularly here in Cape Town, we are speaking about the issue of participation and having our voices heard. Because even though we do object or we do reject some policies that are anti-poor and laws that are anti-poor and laws that further oppress us, it just does not, our voices are not heard. And so mine is really a concern. How do we get this government to change these processes? So the policies should be changed, but yes, the process of democratic participation, even small democratic participation. Right now, there is a burning issue in our city because we have an unlawful occupations bylaw that further oppresses people who are living in occupied buildings, that are living in informal settlements, people who are living in the streets, who do not have housing. And so, for me, my deepest concern is participatory democracy. Mine is a comment more than a question.
In that order, comrades, can you still remember? Loazi and then last year. Loazi and then.
Thanks, comrade. My question is directed to Tshisimani. There were many things that were said about what is happening in the economy, mainly by the mainstream media institutions and also by the politicians, and also there were assassination attempts. So I think maybe if you can assist us and say something about that, and also how true these allegations that armed democracies is not a movement which represent the hopes and aspirations of people of Colombia, because there were many things that were said that, there are some white people who are behind. So can you say something about that, And also, you personally, how did, these allegations affected you personally,
So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Rosie. If we can just hand the mic over to this side.
Now, I think this might be easy, but the question would be, in the current state that our people are in survival mode and quite tend to be ignorant to issues that affect them socially and politically. Now, what kind of strategies, can you put in place in making sure that we mobilize quite a number and build our movements in the ground to be stronger than ever, fighting towards a socialist kind of state? Because people tend to say that they don't need ideas, they can't look up into the future, but they want to eat now because they are hungry now. So how do we come about change that perspective and make sure that they participate in their own emancipation? Thank you.
All right, thanks. So, Comrade, Comrade Garnet, I'm going to give you, because we want to get to the third round, and maybe let's just think of this as a conversation now. I'm going to give you, let's say, about 3 minutes each to just respond to the questions, so that we can take Comrade Trouble, Comrade Kenneth, and others who want to say something as well. Round of applause.
Okay. Let's start on the last question of assassination. When you fight your own government, you must expect anything. That is why there is so many killings of the activists in South Africa. And we're not expecting that in this new democracy, that activists are still no voice. We're hoping that this democracy will have freedom of speech. And it's not only the assassination, also the cases of the slap case from these companies directing to activists that I claim $1 million. You can imagine somebody claiming $1 million because I said that your company is destroying our home. Now the company has the right to claim 1 million rand from a person like myself. It's not even, I don't think even I do have 10 rand. Now we are facing those kind of issues. And also the death threats. And those death threats, besides the assassinations, are not being solved. You report to the police, and they open cases and close cases. And also the assassinations, there is no arrest. Those assassinations, there is no case where you can say that this case was being resolved. Instead, they are jumping, like for example, in our case, our chairperson of Farmer Democracy's committee was being assassinated in this month. This man is a human rights man, but he was being assassinated just a day after the day of the Human Rights Day. Today, I cannot tell you who was the murderer of our chairperson. Instead, the police are playing hide and seek, and we did all our best because we know that this democracy is not trusted. We did go via to hire the private investigators to investigate the murder, because we know that police are not going to investigate. But it didn't take us anywhere. Even the report from the private investigators, they come back and write a report. What I'm saying on record, because it's something that is written. They said that we can't go further because the police are the stumbling block.
It's them, they don't want this case to be proceed. Now, in order to investigate the case as private investigators, we need the support of the police, SAPS. Now, if SAPS is not, they are not interested, that means us as private investigators, we can't go further. But our own state keeps saying that these matters have nothing to do with related to what is happening on the ground. They are pointing somewhere else. Yeah, that is the situation. When it comes to Amadouba Crisis Committee are not representing anybody, that question, it makes me laugh. It makes my heart jump. Because if Amadouba Crisis Committee are not representing the community, why they've been defeated several times? Why? First case, it was a case about the Titanium. They lost in High Court. Second case, it was a case where we said that all the communities must see the application from these mining companies, because you cannot say no or say yes for something that you don't know. That application, communities have the right to see what they are applying for. And the government of South Africa, as they call democratic state, they refused that. They said it must be confidential. How come it can be? And we take them to court, and they lost again. And the third one is Shell, where we said that the laws of South Africa is stated clear that any development that we are here to do in South Africa, you must consult communities. That is the must. It's not even we ask. It's there in the Constitution. And they lost the third time. And now they call us that we are not exist. We are. But it's because we reclaim our democracy from them, because they stole our democracy for the elite. That's what we are doing. Now, when they said that there is white involved, South Africa is a rainbow nation. South Africa is a rainbow nation. We have all the colors in South Africa. Now, when somebody says that there's white, there's black, there's blue, that person, something is wrong here. It's really wrong. It's because you can't get what you want. South Africans are united. And they must ask themselves, when they fought for this democracy, they were fighting alone? No. All South Africans were fighting for this democracy. What is shaped now? Thank you.
Share the ball. Look, it's easy to say we're sold out, you know, and that explains our misery. But it still does not resolve our problems. We still had a right to form a party that would vote for and govern us better. Why didn't we do that? So it's not like we're bad for doing that. No. No. So precisely, it's this way of thinking of democracy, not in ourselves, but in the institutions alone. You know? And I agree with you, comrades. It's not just cynicism, it's real. Our leaders have become anti-democracy. To say when the ANC loses, this country will get into a mess, it's undemocratic, actually. It is undemocratic. You know, it's like when the German chancellor, when the people in Greece were voting against austerity, when it was clear that the austerity vote is winning, and Chancellor Merkel said, no, that vote is wrong. That's anti-democracy by the so-called democratic leaders. Even for Ramaphosa to say, if ANC loses, Boaz will come back, that's anti-democracy, comrades. You know? And for Mandela to say no, when the comrades go to court to contest that this is not the way development is supposed to be done, and then Mandela says no, no. We are chasing away investors. That's anti-democracy. So the NC has become anti-democratic. There's evidence we can show. You know? Now, we will defeat this if we intensify struggles for housing, struggles for land and development, struggles for health care, better health care. And those struggles must be effective. Those struggles must be effective today. Now, these struggles means that we build mass movements. These struggles means that we must conscientize our people. We can call people and explain key concepts in halls like this, but the biggest political education comes from real struggles. When people get defeat in struggles, they know that next time they must organize better. So in those struggles we need strategy. And strategy, there's no answer that is clear that I will give you. No. Effective strategies will come on the ground. We need a vision, comrades. It's not enough to say, no, give us this. No. This is a capitalist government. It's a capitalist state. And now the power of the elites has grown big. We can see that, comrades. And that's why Mantasha and them can talk that nonsense on TV. No one says anything. All of them. So, we need to build the power of the people on the ground. And sometimes the situation looks hopeless. That's why we need hope there. We need hope. So, and that's why I was citing that quotation that building this hope is going to require discipline. You know? So, comrades, that's the immensity of this crisis. We need to exit this crisis into a better society. And that will only happen through struggles. If we don't do that, history has moments where for hundreds of years people were trapped in impasses, in tragic impasses. I mean, a country like, what is this country next to India? Pakistan. You know, even here in Africa, many of these countries, we see these things. Now, we don't want to descend into that. We are close. Sometimes we are there. So, it's up to the people and the activists to organize. And organize for people's power in the interest of the people. For the people, by the people. Thank you.
Questions, because otherwise we're going to get into trouble in terms of closing time. Tweet the questions, no preamble, no thank you, Garnet, thank you, not, that's fine. I've thanked them for all of us. Just go for it.
Hello. Good evening, it's a short comment. I want to tell the House that in South Africa, we don't have the democracy. We have the constitutional democracy. And anything that is outside the constitution is not considered. For a recent example, now that there was an agenda of making sure that in South Africa there's expropriation of land without compensation, because the wealth comes from colonialism, which means dispossession of the land of Africa. As long as we don't have land, then that means we will stay poor. So instead of the government making a referendum so that we all vote whether we do the exploitation or not. They decided the 400 of them in Parliament. That is a minority rule. That's not a majority rule. It's not even less than a million. Only 400 people that rule out. You see, I want to refer to that comrade when he said we don't have power as the people. We have taken our power and we gave it to other people. Yet we agreed in 1965 that the people shall govern. Now, even the ANC, when they were saying that, they throw that away. So we don't have democracy. Hence, we need to galvanize our democracy. That means we must mobilize on the ground and support each other. This social movement that are small, let's come together and move forward. We don't have democracy. Democracy belongs to the people, not the parliament. Thank you, Madam.
Comrade Kenneth, please tweet, not the Facebook status, tweet 280 characters very quick. We're in trouble.
I hope I'm a social media person. First, comrades, I want to start off by saying, to me, democracy means access to decision making. Access to decisions. And I think in South Africa, this is the one thing that we do not have. But let me not reiterate what the comrade said. I just, maybe as a comment, why is it that whenever we speak about democracy, within the same sentence we also use parliament? Within that same sentence of democracy. Is it only a political thing? Is there no other spaces for democracy? No. What about democracy in the workplace? What about democracy in the church? Or does this not matter? And most importantly, if we keep on demanding only democracy be given from parliament, from the state, can it be really democracy when the power is from another institution to make sure that democracy is there? I mean, that in itself makes it undemocratic. But my point is, comrade, is that more than what we think or what we think democracy should be or should be not, is rather than what are we doing as comrades, as people on the ground? What are we doing to instill democracy, even amongst ourselves, to stop the opportunism and gatekeeping and stuff amongst ourselves? Because how can you fight for democracy when you are not democratic yourself?
Thanks, Comrades. Comrades, thank you very much for the contribution that you're making with regards to the debate about the kind of democracy for the future. I want to make a call to all the social movements that are here. We have a very undemocratic city administration that is now in the process of formulating a housing policy, housing and land policy. But we as the social movements need to get together to formulate our own people's assembly around land and housing policy in this city in a democratic fashion to enable the people to speak about land and housing in this city. Thank you. Let's change the board.
We are out of time. We've got 7 minutes. We've got 7 minutes to wrap up. So,
Okay, I was just going to latch on and say let's think about let's look at what are the structures that we are participating in. We're talking about more people's democratic structures, what is going on inside the movements. And the government was talking about back in the day how to support the government and so forth, and how we actually work for social movements for the people's power. And at the same time, we need to speak about how we build a mass democratic movement that brings all of our forces together, and how do we go to the ground and really and truly do not become these commissars and chiefs and all of those things, but be led by our people from the ground, what it is and how to approach it and what Ramaphosa, decade was born, but still they cause some, because I know students that cannot go study because they don't want to take that vaccine. Where's the democracy there? People at workplaces, people have to leave their workplaces because they refuse that. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we've got 5 minutes. What I'm going to ask our comrades, our speakers to do is to offer you closing remarks. Now you can pick up on the questions and comments, but as you do that, you're also offering your closing remarks. So that's about 2 minutes per speaker, and then we'll make this an announcement to make and some housekeeping, and then we'll call it a night.
Okay. On my closing remarks, there was a point of People's Coexist. People's Coexist, it's a big yes. That is the thing that we can do. As I'm saying yes, we need to do a people's alternative, people's IDP, people's development. That's how we should govern. If we don't do that, I'm telling you, this state will finish us, because we need to have our own plans. As also my sister was talking about imposing laws. That is the purpose of demoralizing the communities. Now, in order to fight those imposing laws, as I'm saying that the state right now is in a time of changing the laws that suits the state, not suit the communities. But if the communities on the ground, they are planned and prepared, in order to do so, you need to mobilize, you need to organize, you need to inform, you need to educate, you need to conscientize communities. Once we do that, there's no chance. Thank you.
Comrades, clearly, I agree with all the points that have been raised here. They are valid. But as I conclude, just to emphasize, inequality and poverty means that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. You know? So, because under capitalism, economy becomes the major source of power. You know? So then, the rich, the elite, have a field day. You know? And because the promise of a better life has been betrayed, poverty has expanded in terrible ways. People tend to speak as the research was saying, that they are prepared to give up their right to vote in exchange for a better life. You know, so despondence. So we need to counter that. That's why we need to conscientize our communities that our jobs are not being taken by migrants, by foreign nationals. You know, they are not jobs. They are not being taken by foreign nationals. Our tax shops are not being taken by foreign nationals. No. You know, there's just no real economy in our townships. You know. So what we need with our fellow African brothers, fellow Asian brothers, is solidarity. We don't need to chase them away. To build a better South Africa, a better world. You know. So we need to fight against xenophobia in a real way, but we must also understand why it's there. So that's why polarization is important. But then, comrades, jobs are not going to come anytime soon, given the enormity of unemployment and poverty. That's why a demand for a basic income grant priced at 1,500 is important and indispensable in the current conjuncture. So that's where I leave the discussion.
Thank you.
Comrades were in the dark, literally, but also figuratively, in terms of the bad things that are happening in South Africa now. And there's an author that I like who talks about, a feminist author who talks about hope in the dark. And how, yes, there's the bad, the ugly, and all of that, but without hope, our struggles are on shaky ground. So that's that hope. So I thought let's end it there for tonight. I want to thank everyone for coming through. Thanking the speakers, thanking yourselves. I think you've been great. Everybody who joined us online. We didn't take questions online, but because once you've got South Africans in the room and you say democracy, then we can talk until tomorrow, right? Am I wrong? Right. It's here, right? We feel it. It's something that is here. We can talk until tomorrow, and that's why for 2022, hot on the heels of 2024, when this democracy reaches 30 years, we chose to focus, to start the work and to start focusing on this question of democracy. But it's not just a South African focus. It's a focus beyond our borders. It's a focus on the continent. It's a focus globally, because this idea of democracy in crisis is not just, the debate is not just happening here. So Zama, you wanted to make an announcement. Quickly, so make an announcement, and then you can also announce give an announcement on the refreshments.
Oh.
So yes, you.
Hey, I don't have food for people. I don't have food for people. No, comrades, it's quickly a call, and I think Comrade Pindi has spoken a bit about it. That is Tshisimani Center for Activist Education. We are looking deeper into this question of democracy. There's been different questions and different positions and debates and questions here, and I don't think we'll solve them today or in 2 seminars or 3 seminars. That we are inviting comrades to a series of discussions and workshops and many other things for comrades to come and think about this democracy that we're talking about. Not only democracy in the sense that we look at the union buildings and parliament, but also democracy in our movements. What does it mean in our movements to be democratic? Is the idea of a worker-controlled union still a thing? How we make decisions in our organizations and whether people are not excluded in those. Comrade spoke about Africa, going up and not just looking at ourselves. Last year we had over 5 coups in West Africa, where the military goes and takes over by force. But even in that instance, that people are saying, yes, we are agreeing with the military, these governments we voted for don't do what we want them to do. So the military must take over. And the other people are saying, but why do we have a democracy? I think the military can just wake up tomorrow and then do what it does. So those are the questions that we need to be prepared to say, what kind of democracy do activists envision? You know, people talk about participatory democracy. What does it mean practically? You know, people talk about people's coexist. How do we envision it? How can we see it? So those things we're saying, comrades, have a look out on the Tshisimani pages, have a look out, be in contact with comrades who work at Tshisimani for further programs. So that we're not just having this conversation for the nice web seminars, but we have a reason why we're starting today and we're moving forward. Okay, in the concept of food, because I must feed the masses. We were having refreshments room as a downstairs, it's level A, it's generally our cafeteria, and I think you can prepare the comrades, because they don't stay here. Just prepare them and say, answer this question here, while you are eating, before you go, right? And then we can further the conversations as we eat, and then we go down. It's fine.
Yeah. Thanks everyone.